Hi, and welcome back to FreightWaves Live at Home. We're going to talk about innovation throughout the supply chain in trucking, logistics, 3PL world, all through logistics and the supply chain in this fireside chat. My name's Kevin Hill. I'm the executive publisher here at FreightWaves, and I'm joined by Michael Newcity. He's the Chief Innovation Officer and President of ArcBest Technologies. Thank you for joining us today, Michael.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Kevin.
Perfect. So can you introduce yourself and your role at ArcBest Technologies and within ArcBest to our audience right now?
Sure, yeah. So I've had this innovation role in the organization since 2015. It's a new role to the organization at that time, and it's kind of set on a 5 to 7 year horizon in terms of really driving transformative innovation to ArcBest. And so I'm very excited about that role for the organization. ArcBest Technologies, I serve as the president. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of ArcBest. It's focused on the traditional information technology function, as well as data science, operations science. We've got an engineering group that's focused on research and development around the operational elements of freight operations. And we've got a group of about 500 tech and analytical professionals who really understand technology as well as the freight transportation and logistics space.
And you're based there in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and that's where a majority of ArcBest Technologies is based, but you said you had a few other campuses around the country?
Sure. We've got Plano through our Bear acquisition, and then also Medina through the Panther acquisition. And so we've got really 3 main campuses for our technology employees.
That's great. Now, you've been with ArcBest for a number of years with varied roles. I mean, we were talking right before we hit the record button here about you had done a stint as the CFO of ArcBest. I guess with these varied roles and now as Chief Innovation Officer, what kind of perspective does that give you? And also, how has trucking and logistics changed in your tenure?
Yeah, I think back on the CFO role, that was a great opportunity for me, and I was a non-traditional CFO from 2010 through 2014, and it gave me a much broader perspective on how we view strategy as well as portfolio management. And so, coming into my role now as heading up innovation and technology, I've got a very tight focus on making sure innovation meets the strategy, is driving the strategy, and is viewed from a portfolio perspective. But when I pull back and look at the industry and how it's changed in the last 25 years, I really take it from a system perspective, not just the supply chain, but when you think about a system, you've really got 3 levers that drive it. It's scale, or the number of elements in the system. It's diversity, the number of different elements in the system, and then connectivity. It's the relationship across all those elements. And when I think about how our industry has evolved over the last 25 years, you've got the number of freight modes, you've got the increasing number of capacity providers, asset-based and asset-light for each mode, and then you got all the different ways that we're connecting. You roll in the increasing number of what I call technology arms dealers, like the TMS platforms, the API connections, the data aggregators, the digital-born startups, and you've got a very complex system in our supply chain. And so when I think about strategic supply chain innovation, I think it's about making that very complex system more accessible, more easily accessible to those depending on it, engaging it. And to me, that's the journey that ArcBest has been on in trying to help shippers and capacity providers kind of navigate this complex landscape. It's our strategy around building the multi-mode asset-light operation alongside the asset-based, and it's how we've invested in technology and innovation to drive that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about collaboration, innovation, and that's kind of where the industry is going right now. When it comes to ArcBest in particular, I mean, it's, you have 25 years of experience. ArcBest has 100 years of experience as well. What does it take for an established player to be at the forefront in innovation and trends in technology and how business is done today?
Yeah. So I use the phrase pragmatic innovation. There's a quote from Steve Jobs who said, focus is saying no to the 1,000 good ideas. So you need the focus, but you also need the 1,000 good ideas. And for me, that happens across, 2 or 3 spectrums. It's about investment, and it's about people and partnerships. And first, the tech investment. You've got to be investing at the right level of technology and innovation investment. ArcBest, we're currently around 4% of revenue on technology and innovation investment. We believe that's in line with the industry. However, we also believe that much more of our total tech spend, around 45%, is going toward those transforming initiatives versus the industry average, which is around 30%. And we've been able to do that because we've optimized those run the business technologies through a mix of homegrown and off-the-shelf systems, cloud, on-premise technology. But we've also transformed the way that we view technology spend. It's much more like a portfolio of investments. It's tightly aligned to our strategy versus treating technology like a keep the lights on type function. The other side comes from people, and really kind of in 2 forms. You've got the people you hire and the people you partner with. And the right mix enables you to have a company that you've got technologists and innovators that really understand your business. Our average tenure for technology employees is about 13 years. And so they not only know the technology, but they also know the freight business. And then companies have got to really be open about how they form partnerships. This provides a variable component where you can flex investments as the need arises and source key talent. An example for us is our data science team. We've got over 100 folks working in data science, and 50 of those are direct ArcBest Technologies employees, and the other 50 are offshore, nearshore, and that really enhances that portfolio. And the last thing I'd say, Kevin, is that you've got to really think open about your partnerships. You've got to be much more comfortable working with early stage startups, working with emerging tech, and we've got folks that are dedicated and looking at that space as well.
And this is interesting because you brought up Steve Jobs and saying no to 1,000 good ideas. And over the last at least 5 to let's say 10 years, freight tech is a happening space, right? A lot of VC investments, a lot of good ideas out there. Too many good ideas sometimes, right? Because you get into those thousands of good ideas, and you're talking about partnerships right there. It's a difficult process, right? To winnow those down, who are you going to partner with? Because there are a lot of really good ideas at that, but that means that there's a lot of due diligence by logistics companies like ArcBest, right?
That's right. I completely agree. It really reminds me of. I was involved in the late 1990s in our entry into the .com era with the company, and I just remember a lot of ideas chasing problems. I remember attending a lot of conferences and with the team, and we'd get back and we'd kind of compare notes, and it was really interesting to say, wow, there's a lot of interesting things out there, and we're just not sure how they're gonna continue. So it is. We're really in an interesting time for sure.
It is. It's almost like paralysis by analysis sometimes because there's so many options out there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about innovation. Disruption drives innovation. We all know that phrase. And over the last 12 months, we have had disruption, right? So in your seat, how has this disruption affected innovation in the industry?
Yeah, especially with the pandemic. And I think for us, we had to adapt in different ways when I think about the disruption from the pandemic. Safety was top of mind for our employees. We took aggressive steps to protect frontline employees. You can't deliver freight from the home, right? And so we had employees out there that really we worked with to provide as safe an environment as we could. And then we had technologies in place, fortunately, to bring people home that could go home. And that worked out extremely well. It was a highly collaborative effort across the organization, and reading stories about how other companies did the same thing. It was just a really interesting event. I think the other thing that we did is we used some of our internal data science folks to create an internal dashboard and mashup of some of the CDC data on COVID outbreaks, our employees that were still in the field, and how the infections were tracking across our 250 locations. And we also were able to kind of roll in the state and local regulations that were going on at the time and be able to coordinate and help navigate through that storm using taking a data science approach. And so that went really, really well. One interesting thing that happened is that we were actually, right in the middle, still in the process of a remodel in our facility, in our technology and innovation facility in Fort Smith. And we'd done the demo on 2 floors, and the pandemic hit, and then you're just rethinking, well, do we really go back to the same kind of footprint? Do we think differently about what the new normal is going to look like? And so we actually kind of redesigned the space for what we consider primary office employees versus primary home employees, and we're now in the process where some employees are coming back and having to adapt to that new world.
Yeah, Michael, I hope you guys finished the remodel, and I hope you bought the lumber for that remodel early in the cycle, because if you haven't bought it yet, you're going to pay a very dear price for it, aren't you?
Well, fortunately, we're in the good there. Okay, so that's crazy. For sure.
It really has. It really has. And we're talking about disruption, innovation. What are probably 1 or 2 of the really key things that not only ArcBest, but probably the entire industry has learned from the pandemic, from this disruption, in innovative ways that we have overcome that, and that will really stick? And I think one of those is really deciding who's at work at home first and who needs to be in the office would be one, and having the technology to support both. Are there a couple other lessons that you've learned as well that are going to stick with yourself and the industry as a whole?
I think a couple things on this. I think that we can't be bound with a fixed mindset. We got to think about fixed and variable type concepts. And I think pre-pandemic, most traditional organizations, unless they had a large remote workforce. I mean, our field sales folks are largely remote, pre-pandemic, and have been for a number of years. But when you think about employee groups like call centers, or even tech employees, or our data science and people, that's generally you're managing all around an office space. And so, and honestly, I don't think we didn't know, and I don't think anyone else knew how well that was going to work out, sending all those folks home. At least for us, it's worked out great. It was a situation where we didn't miss a beat on productivity. We didn't miss a beat on delivering projects, at least from a tech and innovation perspective. I heard about people in the M&A space and the startup space, getting series funding and without ever, leaving their home. And so I thought that was really fascinating. So I think having this mindset that we can work from home. And so from our perspective, the way we're looking at that is this. Our organization has a very, very strong culture, and we feel like that culture got us through. We don't want to lose the culture aspect of that, and that comes from being together, doing things together, seeing each other, beyond the Zoom call. And so we want to have that in-office interaction happening, but at the same time, we also don't want to, we feel like the remote aspects of work can play to our advantage, and we don't want to lose that either. So we're still taking the lessons in and kind of figuring that out. But I think we're I think all of us are pleased where we landed.
It's that balance, really. I mean, and we feel it here at FreightWaves as well, right? It's that balance between productivity and quality of life, from having or being able to work remote, and that diffusion of ideas that happen when everyone's in together working on the same problems, and you kind of lose that in Zoom calls or video calls or the remote space. So you have to find that perfect balance, and I think that's what every company, whether this industry or any industry you can pick right now, is trying to balance.
That's right. Totally agree.
Yeah. When it comes to innovation, adoption of new technologies, new systems and methods and partnerships, how's the shipper community? You know, those CPG companies and retail companies and industrials that are shipping product. What are their thoughts right now on technology and integrations and partnerships?
Yeah, and this is something I've seen, you know, from my early days with e-commerce, you know, to today. You know, back then we had, you know, the websites, we had APIs, XML, those kind of connections and things, and still today you're integrating platforms into TMS solutions. And what I'd say, Kevin, and this is probably not going to come as a surprise to you, is there's a significant gap in technology adoption, and it's not necessarily between shippers or logistics companies. I think the adoption differences exist among shippers on their own as well as logistics companies on their own. You've got leaders, you've got laggards, you've got some organizations where they're innovating, they're early adopters of new and emerging tech, some on the bleeding edge, and then you got others that seem to be kind of still living in the Stone Age. You know, their systems are always at the end of the life cycle, and then you've got some that are in the middle with a more pragmatic approach. And I think the problem with that, I think it really adds to the complexity that I spoke of earlier, is when you have such a difference between some folks and on their adoption, it really creates complexity both for the shippers and the logistics companies. And you know, quite honestly, it's also why you've seen such interest from the startup community in our space because of those inefficiencies. There are some organizations that are speaking directly to those differences, and so it's, you know, that's the state we're in.
It is, you know, it is, and hopefully, you know, innovation will drive us all forward and create more efficiencies and better technology, more productivity going forward. I mean, that's the goal for everyone, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and we're talking about pushes in technology and innovation. You know, just last week, the Colonial Pipeline, the ransomware attack. We've covered a number of different ransomware and cyber attacks here at FreightWaves. And also we've heard about quite a few others that we've just never had enough information to print. So whether those are rumors or not, we're not really sure. But if whatever the case, the rumors are rife if those aren't confirmed cases. And we've seen, you know, the panic buying of gasoline about that. And this is one of the real risks out there that we all face is cyber attacks from international groups. And I just wanted to throw a question out there about that and kind of the risks that you see and kind of what you think the impact on the industry is from these security threats.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I guess you were going to bring that question up on this call because it really is recent, interesting news from a supply chain perspective. You know, it's a hot item. So, you know, I think the interesting thing is if we were going to talk about the things that aren't being discussed in cybersecurity, I would have said, you know, infrastructure, you know, power, fuel, water, you know, before the pipeline incident, you know, but they've been talked about for some time now, and really no good solutions have been proposed. You know, the interesting thing about the Colonial Pipeline incident is that it's an indirect supplier incident. You know, most vendor management programs are concerned with direct vendors and assumes they can manage their own supply chain. I think about the Target hack years ago. I mean, that was that was through a partner, a vendor type, indirect vendor relationship. They don't typically deal with our vendors, upstream vendors. So, the other area that I'm really concerned about is communications. I mean, there was the Nashville AT&T incident last December, and that was a physical attack. But the network provider's point of presence are well known. Many are remotely managed. And so, think about disrupting communications across the country through some kind of a concerted attack on network communications. It'd be disastrous. And so I don't think that topic is probably being discussed enough. And then it really amplifies when you think about autonomy on the roads, when you think about IoT that's monitoring all our systems, whether on the infrastructure side. When we think about trying to bring some of these technologies deeper online across the infrastructure, there really needs to be a better perspective, a national perspective, in my view, on how security will be dealt with. These actors, these bad actors, we all know they're well funded, they're very intentional, very intelligent, and so this gets a lot of attention. The other area that does get a lot of discussion, Kevin, is ransomware. It's a growing threat because it's fairly lucrative. It doesn't require a lot of intelligence to perform those kind of activities. And what our security team would say is, if you're following the basic guidelines of cybersecurity, you can really build up a good defense. But again, you're as good as that next partner you're connected with and what they're doing. So this is an area that I think is going to get a lot of attention from this event this week.
It is. It definitely is. We have a couple talks about this exclusively, and you bring up a really good point. Is that indirect vendor? That it's not controlling your own system, but being defensive against people that you work with, your partners and your collaborators, and it's tough. Let's end this fireside chat on better news, though, right?
All right.
Let's turn it back up again, and I'd like to get your thoughts on both ArcBest and the industry in general. What do you see next in technology innovation in the next 5 to 10 years? What's your vision for that?
Yeah, for us, I think, you've got the usual suspects, right? You've got things that are being talked a lot about IoT, about advanced analytics when it comes to, predictive and prescriptive analytics, cognitive engagement technologies. Edge computing is a big one. 5G technologies, automation, of course, or augmentation type technology. Those are all big technologies. They're exciting. There's a huge amount of interplay between those technologies. And so what I'd say, when I think about more near term over the next 5 years, I think we're going to see a significant percentage of tasks today that can become automated, that can become where the decisions can be augmented. And it's not about replacing people. It's about mind and machine doing better together than what it could do separate. And so I really feel like that's a good place. We've developed a number of machine learning algorithms really embedded in the systems that our employees use. They're designed to augment, to improve decision making. We use these solutions across yield management and in our asset light operations. We recently launched a capacity sourcing tool to optimize the utilization of internal equipment capacity. And we're using it in our healthcare analytics to improve the wellness of our employees. So it's not just supply chain type tech that we're looking at internally. We're looking at the wellness of our employees and using that kind of data science in that area as well. I think the other area that is interesting from an innovation perspective is how we think about the physical technologies that move our freight or handle our freight. We've got an R&D program that's designed to more efficiently handle freight. It utilizes some patented handling equipment, software, a patented process to load and unload trailers more rapidly and safely. It pulls full freight loads in and out of a trailer onto a facility floor, and it's accessible from multiple points. And it involves several innovations across mechanical engineering, IoT, edge computing, algorithmic optimization. It's early stage. It's in a limited number of locations, but it provides ABF Freight, our asset-based operation, an opportunity to evaluate the potential for safety, for improved working conditions for our employees, and for a better experience for our customers. And we believe the benefits for that innovation could be improved transit velocity, reduced cargo claims, improved safety. So I would say that, in terms of the next 5 years, I think folks are thinking across the board. They're looking at the physical technologies on how to move freight better. They're looking at the software enhanced kind of data science technologies to improve decision making. And so I'm very excited about the next 5 years in terms of what we'll see happen in our industry.
I am too. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I'm excited about the next 5 years. It's going to be a time of great innovation, and we get the front row seat to see it all, Michael. Thank you so much for coming and joining us at FreightWaves Live at home today, and good luck, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate being here.
You bet. Stick with us and join us for our next fireside chat here at FreightWaves Live at home.